Today I really want to talk about why, as an artist, a visual artist, I really dislike white cube spaces. I spent a long time, I guess, in my early 20s pretending that I liked them or acting as though I understood a lot of the work and the way that it was presented in white cube galleries and white cube style spaces. But I'm at a stage now where I feel quite comfortable and confident to talk about the fact that I do dislike them. I don't think that they're a good thing. I think that they are alienating for the majority of people. I think that they don't present artwork in the best way. And I feel like moving forwards, I'd like to see a step away from white cube spaces and a move towards something more human, something more warm, something more comfortable, something more inviting, whilst also being incredibly professional. And so, yeah, if you're one of those people who's wondering about white cube galleries and if they're any good or not, maybe I'm gonna have a little ramble about them today and we'll see where we get. So I never felt good walking into a white cube gallery. I don't find them very inviting, and I think that that's a major issue. It's a major barrier to entry for a lot of non-artists or members of the general public who don't come from any kind of arts education background. And I think that really it's very problematic because, well, if the majority of people don't feel welcome in a space, then the space is not really serving its potential audience. And so, yeah, that's one big problem with them straight off the bat. You know, there's a great sense of alienation within these white walled spaces. They're completely sterile, they're stripped of all kind of emotion. But ironically, the fact that they're completely white and there's nothing in there says more about the kind of space that it creates than the idea that they don't say anything, you know, at all. Because there is, how can I best explain it? There is this idea in the art world that a white cube space is the most neutral space and it interferes the least with the artwork, and paintings or sculptures in a white cube space have the most opportunity to breathe as their own unique and independent energy, you know, because the painting is on the white wall, the white doesn't interfere with it at all, and it's the best place for it to be. And really, I think that the total opposite is the case. I think the fact that we have got to the stage where we think it's acceptable to put beautiful, spiritually imbued pieces of artwork into such a sterile, hostile, desert-like space is totally crazy. And I don't really understand why we're still doing it. For me, as a painter, you know, I'm a professional oil painter, and I'm very interested in historical techniques and learning about pigments and colour and those sort of things. And so, just logically for me as an oil painter, white is not a neutral colour. White is one of the strongest and most confronting colours that we can use. And whether you want to say white's a colour or not, I'm not really interested in debating that in this video. But white is definitely a shade, isn't it? Let's say, you know, so it's the brightest thing that we can possibly use within painting. And conceptually, as a painter, we have to be very careful about how we implement white within our work, because it doesn't appear very often in nature. And oftentimes, if we use too much white, then it can wash out our painting. It can lead to it looking amateurish or gimmicky or, you know, unresolved, or at times, you know, there's overuse of white. It really detracts from the quality of the work. And so when I hear people talking about how white is a neutral colour for a space, it just doesn't make any sense to me, you know. And you know, white is not a neutral colour. It's the brightest light that we have available to us as painters. And I just think white in any other space would be ridiculed, you know. So it's only in these like creative art spaces that white has somehow found its feet, you know. And you go into anyone's house, if they had white walls everywhere, you would think they were a lunatic. The only place where you have white walls everywhere is in spaces that need to be sterile, like hospitals and surgery rooms and those sort of spaces. And that makes a lot more sense, really, logically. But to have these white walls in an art gallery, I think it's just totally crazy. You know, a little story about where I'm up to, I suppose. As an artist now, a practicing artist, full-time artist, been one for a few years, going to galleries is a real chore for me now, especially white cube galleries. I don't like doing it. I find it a waste of time, to be honest with you. I think that white cube galleries don't show off the work well at all. And so I find lately that when I go to a gallery, I'm just drained of my energy instead of gaining energy through being there and absorbing the art. And the place that I feel most energized these days is in other artists' studios. And I think that's a really crucial point to make, is that for me, an artist studio is the polar opposite of what a white cube is. And everything that a white cube stands for is the polar opposite of what an artist studio is supposed to be about. Or perhaps not supposed to be about, but what the qualities that artists put into their own spaces don't correlate with the qualities that gallerists and curators put into curating shows in white cube spaces. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. You know, my space, everyone who comes here is really wowed by it. And I don't think, you know, that's not an over-exaggeration. They really love it. They think it's a great space. They say the energy is nice, the light is lovely, it's warm and inviting, and they enjoy being here, you know. And contrast those words to a white cube space. You could not say that about those kind of spaces. You know, it's the polar opposite. And so for me, like lately, I've really enjoyed studio visits because not only do I get to see the artwork in the space where it was conceived and created, but I also get to spend time talking with the creator, you know, philosophizing with them. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm not a philosopher, but I like to talk like I am sometimes, you know, over a cup of tea in one of my friend's art studios. So yeah, the sterile space makes people feel excluded. It isn't neutral. I've already touched on those things. And I think as someone who comes from a working class background, I find it really irritating that a lot of artists who are working today make artwork and exhibit that artwork in spaces that are just anti-working class. There's no other way to put it. You know, the fact that, okay, I've never met a working class person who enjoys going to an art gallery, and that's just the truth. And I think if that's the truth, then there's something wrong with it deeply. You know, I really believe that art should be for everybody. But I also believe that there is a distinction between more realised art and more amateur art. And that's not a value judgment, you know, it's not to say that one is more important than another, but I think there is a distinction to be made between, you know, the same with music, like some music is made by people who aren't very good technically, but they have a love for it, and some music is incredibly accomplished, refined, and, you know, I think in the same way that the art world should work in the same way as that. And so if art is supposed to be for everybody, then why is it not exhibited in places that are for everybody, you know? I work at a gallery locally. I do a lot of installation work and curation work for them and help to set up new exhibitions and whatnot. And I really love how the director and curator there, Martin, always chooses unusual colours for the walls. And me and him have some great conversations about this. And we both agree that actually a well-chosen coloured wall adds so much value to an exhibition. It makes it infinitely more welcoming to people who are perhaps unaccustomed to gallery spaces. And I think it just adds a lot to the work as well, you know. I need to go back to the idea of white walls being neutral. They're just not, you know. If people think they are, then please leave a comment, and I'm happy to discuss that, but I just don't see white walls as being neutral. And so, you know, I made a note here. On a more practical level, I just feel sorry for people that work at these spaces. I feel sorry for the invigilators that have to sit there, you know, all day in a horrible white room with a few paintings on the wall. It just doesn't, it seems like just some kind of dystopian fallout from modernism or postmodernism, you know, and it's like, you see it with architecture these days as well. Buildings are so ugly that they make now. There's no craftsmanship, no care. Everything is just completely sterilised. You see it with cars, and how the number of grey, white and black cars has just skyrocketed in the last sort of 50 years, whereas before we used to have all kinds of weird and wonderful colours of cars on the road. And I feel like it happens in the art spaces as well. And yeah, this video is me saying that I don't like it, you know. When I moved into this space, I intentionally chose to have a kind of a, well, it's a very soft blue-grey colour on the walls, because I wanted something light, but not too light that it would bounce the natural light around everywhere. And I really like it, you know, it really brings a softness to the space. And yeah, I think I haven't really planned this talk, and I have gone on a bit of a ramble and a rant, but one thing I want to try and do more these days is just be a bit more opinionated and a bit more vocal about things that I'm passionate about. And so I do really believe that art lives better in homes and studios and unusual spaces. Like a lot of my friends that I really look up to in the art world are those who are making use of unusual, anti-establishment, not traditional, well, no, I need to retract that word traditional. These spaces that people are using are not white cube spaces, but I don't consider white cube spaces to be traditional anyway. I think that they've been a kind of blip in our sort of art history. And I do honestly think that, I suspect that we'll look back and we'll think like, what the hell were we thinking doing that, you know? Because just to close on this, for me, art is a deeply spiritual practice. It's something that I do because it makes me feel better about myself. It helps me to figure things out. It helps me to understand myself and the world. And it helps me to connect to the past, and it helps me to leave a legacy for the future as well. And the idea of it being stored forever on a white wall in some square boxy room with, you know, nothing else of interest is just not something I'm really interested in myself. So yeah, if you agree, let me know, and if you disagree, leave a comment, please. I'm really open to discussion on this topic. Yeah, so far these videos have been a bit all over the place, but I'm just finding my feet with them, and that's all right, you know. But I'm going to keep up the intensity, so if you enjoy what I'm saying, give me a subscribe and let me know. Appreciate it. Thank you.